This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, I asked Joey about what kills good ideas, and he asks me about body doubling. Woo!
Every time I go to start to sing a song, I'm like, oh, I'll sing that one. And I'm like, oh, no, you cannot sing that. This is what a Joey sounds like.
Oh, no.
How dare you? You don't have the range. And this is what an executive producer and insert relevant Excel function about range Jess Vander sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess. Maybe you're thinking of the range function?
Yeah, I know, but I was like, what's like a cooler range function, among all of those cool Excel functions? I'm like, oh, can I pull it up now?
Max,
range,
min,
if or error, offset, X match, lookup range.
That's me, full of dimension.
Jess, I don't want to talk about cleaning. It's not the new year yet.
Can I just say a quick thing that is not our collective house, but my own personal house?
Yes.
That I listened again to hear if, when describing the milk math, I made any sense at all. And I did think to myself, wow, do I sound like a total idiot for thinking that this is interesting when anyone else listening could just be like, yeah, that's how thoughts work. Like, it's okay that two different things can coexist. And I was just feeling kind of dumb, but I also kind of stand by what I meant to say. Anyway, go have a listen. Tell me if you think it's dumb. I don't know.
My brother sent me a text message yesterday apropos of nothing that just said maybe 5% is 100%. And I was like, sir, this is a Wendy's? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I was like, what? We were having like a different conversation. There was like an hour and a half break, and then it was just maybe 5%. And I'm like, I was like, did I miss something? Like,
that's so encouraging. That makes me so happy. All right, maybe it was not all for nothing.
Yeah, it literally just says maybe 5% does equal 100%, and I'm like, okay, quoi?
And then did you realize later?
He had to tell me, and then I was like, oh right, got it. Yeah, I did. I was not there initially.
For more information on this question, take a listen to our last episode, 201.
About milk math.
About the milk math.
Essence of nonsense.
It's true. It really may have been the most nonsense roller coaster we have ever been on.
It's a bold statement. There are 200 episodes with the majority having multiple topics per episode.
That's fair. You're right. I shouldn't say things like that so lightly.
It may be. I'm not. I'm just like this.
You're like, but also maybe.
Of the, 330 different topics we've covered, milk math being the most nonsensical is like, all right, okay.
That's as far as we go.
Well,
for now.
Jess, what do you have for us today? And then if we have time, we can hit my little Joey stares at a shiny thing corner.
No, we love that. There were a few things that happened in the last week that made me think about ideas that should be good but aren't. The first
juice science.
The first juice science?
It's like milk math. It's just juice science.
Pulp or no pulp?
Yeah.
Okay. The first was a company presentation where, without getting into too many specifics, there is, as part of the company that we are now a part of, the our parent company, an internal sort of community platform trying to connect all of the different organizations that could be tethered to one another, and all of the creative people that work at all of these different companies that we are now associated with, and how to bring those people together and how to start generating connections and ideas, and also recognizing that it's hard enough to create cohesion in a single organization. The first thought that I had to myself was, is this really gonna do the job of bringing people together, or is it just like a small niche LinkedIn? And that is skepticism number one. Second skepticism appeared when I was with my friends at a bar watching the Michigan game. Not the Michigan game, but another one. Go Blue. And when we got there, we realized that simultaneously at this bar, there was also a speed dating event going on, and we were fascinated to see the dynamics of the people and who left early. It was just very interesting to see who was attending this event. And I have to say, my first thought was like, you know what? Totally understand why for singles, this would be a much more efficient way to get through dates with people and move beyond things that aren't working out quicker. And yet there was also just the feeling of who does that? Is that its own filtering or signaling of someone who's open to doing speed dating? I was like, what is that feeling? And the last was in a conversation with Camille from our team, who's in town this week. We were realizing that a common theme of Sylvain folk is that is actually best represented on this podcast, and perhaps even in this very episode, that idea of following one thing with another seemingly totally unrelated thing, and then doing your best to try to tether them. It got brought up in the conversation where I think we were first talking about placenta as skincare, and eventually took ourselves to a dinosaur invasion and where the safest place to be in the case of said invasion would be. And Camille was like, that's going to be the Sylvain segue. That's what it should be called. And I was like, that is a great idea. And also I have no idea, and here's skepticism 3, I don't know if you're going to be able to make fetch happen. I don't know if this is going to catch on. And I think that what it just brought to me, I know this is a lot of setup, but it just was a reminder that even if things make a lot of sense, sometimes there's just a nail in the coffin that, even if it feels small, can balloon out into being, the death of what should be a good idea. And I guess my question is, why? It should be a good idea.
It is interesting of sort of the distinction between theory and application. That's sort of what first comes to mind in that sort of delta between science and engineering, right? You hear civil engineers sometimes, or materials engineers, be like, that's a pretty picture, we can't build it.
How am I supposed to, what do you think is happening?
Yeah, great diagram, have you ever used this material under these conditions? It doesn't work. That gets real hot, so great idea, but you can't use it. Right. All my engineer friends, all my college friends, all became engineers. Somehow I was in a dorm floor that was all engineers, and 2 of us were in social sciences, and so all the friends I still stay in touch with and go on weekend hiking trips or things like that with are all engineers, and this is all of their conversations. Even some of them are doing really advanced aspects of engineering that is blending with science, and their first reaction is always oh, this can't be done. So part of it makes me think about you, Jess, as engineer Jess, not scientist Jess, which feels true. science Olympiad.
Interesting. Me being like, yeah, that's unrealistic.
Yeah. I feel like at your heart, you are more of an engineer, or you're more application than theory.
There's a reason I was bad at chemistry and much better at gluing sticks together. Very practical mind. Very small mind. That's me.
But
small practical mind.
But it does go to that, like, the complexity of reality versus the simplicity of theory at times, right? In any of these instances, right? It's like, it's hard to meet new people, and a lot of single people would just like to meet someone and be able to be in a relationship. So let's just have them meet 75 people at once.
It's like,
right?
what if we do this thing? And you're like, yeah, okay. But the thing that you're missing in all of that is that it requires putting yourself out there in a very formally structured context. And to do that is then going to invite people who are comfortable having such an interaction in a very formally structured context. And that does a filtering that maybe is going to get in the way of this being more open to a certain base of people, and instead is going to get a very niche subset of people who are willing volunteers for something like that.
Yeah, the joy of coming up with one of those ideas and then being like slapped by reality, it feels like a thing like most people will be like familiar with, because it can be like really small things of like, I bought this thing for my apartment and it's gonna work out great, and it's like, it doesn't fit. That's the small version of that. But like in these sort of other instances, there are like scales to what we're talking about, right? Like making culturally the Sylvain segue as an example happen is like, like it could happen if you're just like referencing it perpetually, but it's small and it's casually. Like, and then speed dating versus then, building a digital platform is complicated, and those things can work. But the things that invariably get in the way are really small things about human behavior that are really hard to anticipate or predict,
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so interesting, maybe not surprising, but to think about how this like putting theory to practice happens not just in like a formal scientific context, but it happens constantly in like very casual situations where it's like, oh, that should make sense, but it's missing a key ingredient, or there's like, there's something that you need to have there that would like solve this, but you don't have it, and so it's not going to happen. Or is it about an incomplete logic where like most of this makes sense except for this one piece that like actually breaks everything? Or the third of like requiring some kind of activation energy where like it could happen, but it needs to have enough of an activation energy to get there. And I think all of those feel like formal concepts, but that could be applied in very like simple everyday contexts. And when you experience them firsthand, you're like, wow, that is just good things getting crushed left and right.
Well, it's interesting too, because when you think about the dance between partnered scientists, right? Like in a lot of major scientific projects, you will have like a theoretical physicist and an engineering based physicist, right? That are both experts, but like in building these like gigantic, like the James Webb telescope, right? You need someone who is doing the theory to demonstrate that, again, in theory, you can capture X type of data using X type of method, but then someone has to go and build it. And they have to say like, well, I can't do it that way. like what's another, right?
But maybe I could do it this way.
Yeah, there is.
Does that still solve the problem?
This perpetual give and take in those examples where something really robust and amazing is built and is this long series of iteration. And, thinking about, obviously, like, I'm sure speed dating events happen in a very sort of varied way, right? Like there are individual speed dating events put on by like local communities or whatever that are, or groups of friends. But the concept that stuck is just put people in a room and have one group cycle and everyone is seeing everyone else's interactions. And that is just like the thing that is like re-tapped into constantly, versus if you took that same sort of ability to, even in an individual, to cognitively shift from theory to practice and go back and sort of capture that like iteration loop in an individual, it would be interesting, right? Like, and maybe people do this automatically and not so explicitly, where they're saying like, okay, I'm going into engineering brain. Now I'm going into theoretical brain, and now I'm going back.
Yeah.
And so, you can outsource those things when you're building a team, right? Of saying like, this person is more practical, or this person's an engineer, or this person's a product person, and this person is a whatever, a strategist, or a scientist, or whatever, and they're trying to think of bigger things. But having that give and take, like, almost never does that first theory work, and you need that like heat of iteration. And like in the case of the in quotes Sylvain segue, like maybe that's not the right name, but if you called it something different, you could make fetch happen.
Whoa.
Or in the case of speed dating, like maybe not calling it speed dating and making it more private, because that is actually where the contention is, or changing or expanding time limits, or creating opportunities for, varied personalities who might be drawn to speed dating to actually flourish in that context, right? Like you're removing the opportunity, or you're removing the demand in speed dating to have to find some cohort of people to speak to, right? So already that is more oriented towards introverts maybe, or people who have some level of social apprehension, but then the rest of the experience is not designed for someone who is an introvert or has social apprehension.
Right. What if instead you do some wild stunt where you say, sometime this year, we're going to invite some like amazing, like Obama is going to come to the speed dating event, but we're not going to tell you which one it is. And so you can say, oh, I'm here just in case Obama shows up. And it's fine, because then you have an excuse for being there, and then you don't have to feel any amount of like shyness, because it's all under the guise of maybe Obama shows up. And that is, like an unexpected partnership that could maybe, add the missing ingredient.
So you think
that's like one idea that I have. That's
so
like
you think the issue with speed dating is just getting people to show up, and Obama is gonna make it happen. Obama will be in the room. You're not gonna talk to Obama. He's very happily married to Michelle, but he'll be
exactly.
there.
He's just there to like talk to you.
You will have propinquity with Barack Obama.
You just go in and hang out, and what a draw that will be.
I have a feeling that for someone who is socially awkward or uncomfortable or anxious about being perceived while on a date, adding Barack Obama, the 44th president of the United States, to observe, like the picture of like cool charisma, to observe how bad you are at dating, doesn't feel like the best incentive to get someone to have a good speed date.
Okay, practical physicist, I get it.
I'm putting on my engineering hat.
All right, fine. We'll just have to keep testing and see a better way to solve for that problem.
But it does go back to that idea of like, iterative creativity that we spoke about, like, now on our 202nd episode, like ages ago, we had talked about iterative creativity within music and things like that, where sometimes, in art, where we think of like the artist being the greatest version of that, like the third take on Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen is actually the best take. And so in this case, like, speed dating has stuck enough to where I assume almost everyone who is listening to this at least knows what speed dating is in a sort of raw, like, generic format. And so for it to fetch happened, but also no one is like, speed dating, great, I want to do speed dating. Or maybe or like most people aren't.
Small subset of, right, for some people maybe, but it hasn't reached sort of the peak optimization of like, that would make a lot of sense for most people.
Yeah, like Tinder and Bumble and Hinge and whatever other apps exist because speed dating wasn't good enough to be the thing.
Exactly. Can I swipe? Like, swiping, it's not going to be as effective as a conversation perhaps, but at least it can do some speedy filtering system, which is kind of what speed dating is trying to do. Yeah, some proxy makes sense. To your point about iterative creativity, the thing that I can't stop talking about is this truly genius problem solving that Brian did a couple weeks ago. We were hanging out with my mom and my Abu, and my mom has been trying to get my Abu to drink more water. And her way to do this is saying, "Ma, drink more water. Have a drink of water." She's like, "I don't want water." It's like, I don't, like, stop telling me to drink my water. I don't want it. She's like, "All right, I'm going to get hot water and I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it really appealing by like freshening it up and like tapping on the glass to try to get her to, it's like she spends too much time with her dog." But ultimately we're just trying to keep her healthy, and but all of these tactics were failing, and we went over there for dinner, and after watching my mom try this a couple times, Ryan just takes his glass and he goes, "Cheers." And she's like, "Hey, cheers." And then she takes a sip because she has been now sworn to the honor of the cheers, wherein you now must drink something from your cup. And both my mom and I, like, jaws dropped to the floor, and we tried it again, and it worked again. You can try it, and if she's in the middle of something, it'll still work like 2 minutes later, because she's like, "Oh, gotta get back to that cheers that I owe him." And it's like, it's a miracle. It's so effective. And I just love the idea that it's just like, maybe you're just missing something. Maybe you just like haven't really thought about it. And that's what strategy is, and that's why we're here today.
It's also hilarious that when we reach a certain age, when you hit 100, you actually just turn into a toddler again that can be manipulated by.
We're like, "Oh my God." Yeah, exactly.
Do you think she still remembers the last time we did this? Nope, she doesn't.
Nope.
She doesn't remember.
No, she doesn't. And not because like, that's just what happens when you get old.
That's social engineering.
That is just the way it goes. That is kind of amazing. And, like...
Ryan saw your mom's theory and said, "Hold my beer."
And was like, exactly. It was like...
Ryan also is an engineer.
That's accurate, yeah. True. Where we align incentives, right? Like, she actively wants to participate in a cheers. She's not just going to do what you boss her around to do. No thanks. She does want to celebrate this toasting occasion, though.
Yeah. Oh, it's 4:00. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, Jess, do you want to wrap up our fetch corner?
I love that you took it to this place where things that make sense in theory often hit a snag when we test them in real life, and that borrows from systems that we use in academic settings to discover really complicated ideas, but it also shows up in really small moments in life, because that's kind of what life is about. Some things take, some things don't, and that's why we keep trying and allowing those things to push and pull each other. And who knows, maybe we'll come up with some good ideas that stick.
Who knows? One can dream.
Certainly we're going to need to come up with a better speed dating idea, though.
Come to our speed dating event on December 17th.
Obama may or may not be there.
We got Gary Obama, but we didn't say which Obama.
All the speed daters of America are rioting.
Yeah.
They're so upset.
They are not happy.
They're not happy.
Jessica.
Joey.
I have a thing I want to talk to you about.
Okay, hurry up.
In Joey's shiny object corner.
Corner is shiny? Oh, okay.
There's a shiny object in my corner. This is really... Okay. That's inappropriate of me about myself to call a segment about ADHD Joey's shiny object corner. I came across a concept recently, and it was just a funny experience where I don't know if you've had this happen to you, where you come across a new idea and you have like a huge portion of your life or some important part of your life like suddenly make sense, like a thing you've maybe even thought about before. Has this ever happened to you?
A revelation type moment?
Yeah. I guess maybe a personal revelation where like all of a sudden you have a new concept and you're like, oh yeah, no, I do that.
Of course. Yeah. Did this happen to you?
Yeah, I've actually had a few ADHD related thing. I think the conversation has opened up a lot about it, and there has been a decent amount of science that has happened around ADHD in the past decade. And so I think the combination of people being more open and more science happening is resulting in just sort of like an expanded language. But one of the things that did that, I'll share both, but one of the things that did this was this idea of body doubling, which is essentially a strategy, I guess, that's how they talk about it in folks with ADHD, where they will tend to surround themselves with other people in order to accomplish things that are either difficult for them or they're having difficulty generating motivation around, or is important and there's just like urgency. And I realized like, oh, like I've been doing this forever. And I wanted to ask you about, how do you use concepts that you discover to make things better for yourself?
It's interesting because my first thought was, you don't even clearly need this concept to have had the intuition. And so I guess what I'm interested in understanding is it more just that it puts a name to a thing that helps you see and sort of organize and make sense of your own behaviors better? But I don't know. I feel like you've got it. No?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think I do it, or I had done this thing unconsciously. And then at some point I was sort of like, I had clarity around the edge. So like all of the side projects or like creative projects that I've ever done, I've always like tried to include a bunch of people to be like, okay, like let's do this together because I can't do like
literally me.
yeah, I just can't get
like I am here.
Yeah, hi.
For this reason.
You're Jess.
Hi, this is Jess.
I can figure a thing out, but there's something about the momentum that just another person that, like, even if I'm doing almost all of the things, like, it's just, there's another person with me doing this. And that helps. Like, did a 8-person, like, creative project in grad school that lasted for 2 years and helped us get jobs. I made Ben be my strategy partner and like go get a job together that way. Like, even when I'm doing things now where I will have like developed something at the company or like built this new financial model, I'm like, I built it. Like that's the hard part. But then it's like, you have to talk to someone about this or you have to share this with people. I'm like, oh, what do I say? Like, it's right here. It's like, it's here. And I hit walls. And for those things, I literally could just have someone sitting in a room and I'm talking about it to them. And all of a sudden I can get through and there's no new revelations, but it's like, oh no, I just hit a wall. I have to explain this to someone. Like,
yeah,
I can't get past that wall.
Oh my goodness. I am the same. I mean, this is why in my company, how to work with me doc,
your user manual.
Like, I have this phenomenon that I have found myself stumbling into where I love to just be on a video call with people while we're working because it just keeps us productive, or at least it keeps me productive. Even if we're not talking, we're just silently on a call. And I just say this so that people know that it's not weird if we're like, all right, now like we've had this call and we're going to sign off, and that like sometimes I linger for a reason. And I totally relate to the idea for sure.
Yeah, but like knowing, right, like even in that case, right, that is body doubling, right? What was interesting is when I first encountered it, people were like, yeah, I had an important thing to do. And sometimes I can just tell myself a story about it where someone isn't even aware of what I'm doing. Like, if I need to be productive, I will go to a coffee shop and look like I'm doing work. So then people are expecting me to be the person who is getting work done at a coffee shop. They don't know what I'm doing. I could be doing anything. It doesn't matter. But my idea in my head of them having expectations of me makes me do my whatever it is I need to get done.
That is motivational. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's where, to me, this is somewhat related to the world of astrology and personality tests and strengths finder and all those types of things, because the potential power of knowing thyself can be a tool for you to like wield of like, all right, if I know this, how can I make that, or it like, how can I trick myself, or how can I like lean on my strengths and like make something of that? Where I think it's tricky is if you feel like, all right, so because I know that I need other people to stay motivated, that now that's like all I can ever do. And what is cool about the coffee shop example is that it's almost like hacking.
Yeah.
It's like hacking yourself.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, I understand this thing about me, but I don't want to let it define me. I want to be able to figure out other ways to achieve this goal so that I'm not asking all my friends to do all my projects with me. Cough, cough, cough.
Yeah. I think that part of it is sometimes I fall into the mentality of, I can't always stay there, and sometimes it's relevant, it's not, but of just being like, this is a machine, right? Like, I'm a machine that is good at certain things, but like you have to sort of do machine maintenance. And so it's like, okay, I can't put super unleaded in the car, but I can, put like a little one of those like fuel cleaner containers in, and it gets you most of the way there, right? Like, if you look at it that way, like there's a context where I have optimum performance of my machine, and one of those things is like having other people and some sort of like social pressure applied to the machine makes it work better, right? And so it's like, you don't always need it, but like using that machine may be easier in these contexts, right? Like, you know, don't leave gasoline in a warm place, right? Like you many things come with that like user manual context, but what happens is, you know, there's such a negative aspect to sort of broadly medicalization culture, and we've spoken about that in the past. We spoke about that with Alana at one point. But what is valuable is like when somehow something has been medicalized and you've identified patterns, and then you can start to identify behaviors, you can use those things for yourself. Like if you can sort of push off like the disordering aspect of what comes with medicalization and say like, oh, you know, like body doubling is useful. Like this is now an additional tool. It makes me wonder too, like where are those other things that exist out, like what are the patterns that exist outside of medicalized things where I have ADHD and I have undermyelinated axons in my prefrontal cortex, and like that's a specific thing, and so I can identify these things. But like, you know, in sort of normal realm of cognitive functioning, what do people need? Or what are things that you could use as these equivalent tools, you know?
If I may.
You may.
I would love to introduce a suggestion with an analogy with a wrap-up corner.
Let's do it.
And that might be because I've been playing too much Dungeons and Dragons lately, but there is a thing that you get, which is called your character sheet. And in your character sheet, there's like a list of like actions and skills and like things you can do. And over time, you collect more of those things. And I just love the idea of, maybe not in the context of medicalization or what have you, but collecting those skills that you have and knowing like, hey, if you want, you can use body doubling and it gives you a boost of productivity and motivation in times that you need it. And it's something that you use as opposed to something that you are or that you need. And who knows, you could even just like download one of those sheets and then figure out, are you like a rogue or an elf lord, or you know, that's just besides the point.
You only get 2 charges of body doubling before taking a long rest.
Oh, we made it so nerdy. But the principle still stands.
Yeah.
Thinking about how to turn these things you find out about yourself into tools that you can keep in your holster, your proverbial holster. That's kind of interesting.
For any other ADHD folks, look up stimming as well. That was like an interesting one of stimulating behaviors so that you can focus. Well, that wraps it up. You nailed it, Jess. 2 charges. Thanks. You just got
initiative on my next turn.
You just got a bonus charge of wrapping it up.
Inspiration.
Yeah, you have inspiration.
Well, cool. Thanks so much.
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by A Great Idea.
As always, we'd like to thank executive producer and body double, Jess Vander.
Strange. We'd also like to thank sound engineer and another great idea, Alex Contel.
We'd like to thank programming coordinator and my personal stimulant, Les Jacobs.
And you guessed it, we have to give special thanks to our production crew and perhaps the best ideas. Sorry, Gilbert and Norm Estridge.
And as always, thanks, Elen.
Thanks, Elen.
Special thanks to Gary Gygax, I guess, Dungeons and Dragons creator and dude with a sweet name.
That's true. How do you spell Gygax?
I think Gygax. That's like a...
What? With an X? Having an X in your name is automatically cool. Gygax.
Gary Gygax.
That's a lot of G's in one name. Wow.
I'd like to thank our elf on the shelf, who is also named Gary, because my daughter asked what his name was, and I was like, Gary? Which we've also introduced, not because of like being a narc. I told my wife, I was like, Gary's not a narc, but he's just like a little bit of weird, like fantasy imagination that we brought into our home. Thanks, Gary.
Can I ask a question? Because this could potentially be a revelation for me. In my mind, Elf on a Shelf is like not, I don't understand what it is. And it almost makes me think it's like a euphemism for some like I don't like, what is that?
So in our case, it was actually a gnome because I just saw it at a store and I was like, oh, that'll be fun. But it's like a chubby little gnome, like stuffed creature. And you like move it around the house. Like we'll do it like twice, 3 times a day. Sometimes just like put him in weird places. But like the original idea is like they're Santa's narc, like Santa's hall monitor, like comes out for a month.
That's how he knows if you're sleeping or awake or things like that.
Yeah, he's just like telling on you if you do bad things, and you use it as like,
Santa's narc.
The elf is gonna tell Santa that you didn't eat your broccoli or whatever.
Goodness.
But I was like, I don't want him to be a narc. I just want to have like a fun imaginary thing in the apartment that
like Margaret, and then there's the gnome.
Yeah, there's the British woman that inhabits my body at times named Margaret, and then there is the gnome / elf on the shelf, Gary, who I just perpetually put in. It is like a fun game of brinksmanship where you're just putting them in perpetually more and more
increasingly crazy
bizarre places.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. So, thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. And also thanks, Gary.
Yeah. Thanks, GG and G. And so triple G cubed.
G cubed.
Sick. Well, love you. Bye.
Bye.
How dare you? You don't have the range.